Okay. So we're moving on to chapter 8, Akshara Brahma Yoga. Akshara Brahma Yoga. So the previous chapter he ended with mentioning Adhibhutah, Adhidaiva, Adhiyajna. And then Arjuna asks those questions here. So he is saying, Kim Tad Brahma, Kim Adhyatmam, Kim Karma, Purushottama. Kim means what? Kim Tad Brahma, what is that Brahma? Brahman, what is that Brahman? Kim Adhyatmam, what does Adhyatmam mean? Kim Karma, what is Karma? Kim Adhibhutam, Adhibhutan Chakim, Adhidaivam Kim Uchyate, what is known as Adhidaivam? Adhiyajnam Katham, how is Adhiyajnam? Where is it? Kotra Dehesmin Madhusudana, in this body, where is it? And then he adds another question, Prayana Kale Chakatham Gneyosi Niyatatmabhihi. At the time of Prayana Kala, at the time of leaving the body, how do I make sure, how do I ensure Gneyosi, I think about you, or one thinks about you. How is it possible? How is that made possible? So there are 7 questions here. Kim Tad Brahma, Kim Adhyatmam, Kim Karma, Adhibhutam Kim, Adhidaivam Kim, Adhiyajnah Kim, Katham, Adhiyajnah Kim, Prayana Kale, Katham Gneyosi. So 7 questions he's asking. So 6 are, most of these questions are inserted by Bhagavan himself. Usually, you see, teachers, a class, when the class is going on, or at certain times of the class, the teacher may ask, some teachers who are bold enough may ask, did you understand? Because a lot of teachers are worried if you ask this question and then somebody says, no, I didn't understand. They have to either start explaining or they may wonder, where do I start from again? I spoke for so long, where do I now start? But there are some bold teachers who may ask, okay, did you understand? And then the class can be silent, right? And silence can mean 2 things. Either everybody's understood everything or nobody's understood anything. So, but some teachers, what they do is they will also put some words or some thoughts or some concepts suddenly they will introduce. And if an attentive student will ask the question, and then the teacher will say, aha, see, so you've been listening to what I'm saying, right? திடீர்னு நடுவுல ஏதாவது ஒன்று சொருகி விட்டுருவா. They'll put something in to just check if any student has paid attention, and if an attentive student will ask the question. So here in the previous verse, suddenly he introduced Adhibhutam, Adhidaivam, Adhiyajnam and all that. Suddenly he introduced in the last verse. And Arjuna is smart enough to catch that. He's quickly caught it, and then he's asking the questions around that. So these are not questions that occurred to Arjuna. It is planted by Sri Krishna himself. And then he also is asking about who is Brahman, what is karma. And you've been telling that one who thinks about me at the time of death attains me. The one who keeps worshipping the other deities, the other celestials, will attain to that form or that energy form. Those who think about me will come to me. So he's asking, how does that happen? Okay, so this is this particular verse, 2 verses. Then we move on to the next verse where Bhagavan is responding. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Aksharam Brahma Paramam. So all the 7 questions he is going to respond here. Aksharam Paramam Brahmam, which means Brahma is Aksharam Paramam. Aksharam Brahma Paramam Swabhavah Adhyatmam Uchyate. Swabhavah iti Adhyatmam. Adhyatmam is nothing but Swabhava. It is your own self. Aksharam Brahma Paramam means Brahman is nothing but the indestructible supreme. Aksharam Paramam, supreme that is indestructible, is Brahman. Akshara Brahma Paramam. Aksharam Brahma Paramam. Then Swabhavaha Adhyatmam. Your own self is Adhyatmam. Uchyate. Uchyate means it is said. Your own self is Adhyatmam. Bhuta bhavot bhavakarah visargah karma sanyitah. What is karma? Karma is that which is born out of the actions of living beings. The actions that living beings do with a certain intention of a fruit. Any action that we do with the anticipation of a fruit, of a result, that action is called, termed as karma. Bhuta bhavot bhavakarah. Bhavot bhavakarah means all these, the bhutas or the living beings. Udbhavakarah. Udbhavakarah is the actions that rise from and is sustained, visargaha, and it keeps developing and created, because one action creates, there is a desire, it creates an action, the action expects a result. Whether the result comes or doesn't come, then it further propagates another action, right? It keeps going on and on. Karma sanyitah, this is known as karma. And then the verse 4, he goes to explain adhibhutam ksharo bhavah. What is adhibhutam? He says adhibhutam is the destructibles. Like how he said Brahman, Brahma is indestructible. Aksharam paramam is Brahma. Here it is ksharam. Bhavaha is adhibhutam, which means all that you see in this world that is manifest, that is created, that is adhibhutam, because all of this will be destroyed. All that has come out of the five elements will go back to the five elements. Be it anything, any matter that you see in this planet Earth or this universe for that matter is created out of five elements and will go back to the five elements. Law of conservation of mass. Yes, Kalpaka. Correct. There is nothing destroyed, nothing. This is the second law of thermodynamics of Newton, right? Energy only transfers from one form to the other. It modifies itself from one form to the other. Nothing is actually destroyed. What happens is it goes back into the elemental forms. Whatever gets created, when they say it's destroyed, means it is disintegrated into the five elements. So adhibhutam is nothing but ksharo bhavaha. Purushachadhi daivatam. Adhidaivatam is the Purusha or the Lord of all the celestials. It is the, in a way we can refer to it as, in one form it can be referred to as Ishvara. Ishvara is that entity of Brahman that is manifest. Usually the equation is Brahman plus Maya equals Ishvara. Just to bring a term, just to explain Ishvara, but of course Ishvara is also referred to as Sadashiva, Brahman. It's interchangeable, but if you look at the way in which Bhagavan Adi Shankaracharya has mentioned in the Tattva Bodha, Brahman plus Maya is Ishvara. So Brahman is the unmanifest, Para. Then comes Maya, which is the principle of creation, the principle that that enables manifestation, and the principle that governs manifestation is Ishvara, Isha. So Adhidaivatam is the principle of Isha or Ishvara, or also Virata Purusha. Another way, Hiranyagarbha or Virata Purusha. All the collective consciousness of the waking state is called as Virata. In this is another reference that is made in Mandukya Upanishad. The individual waking consciousness is called Vishwa. The collective waking consciousness is called Virata. The individual dream consciousness is called Taijasa. The collective dream consciousness is called Hiranyagarbha. Right? And the individual deep sleep state of consciousness is called Prajna. The collective Karana Sharira or the collective deep sleep consciousness is known as Ishvara. So it's a term that is given to show the difference between what is called as the individual and the collective. So this is, in this case, he's saying Adhidaivam. What is Adhidaivam? It is the collective consciousness of all living beings or all the celestials, all the natural forces that are there. The collective consciousness, all the natural forces, Adhidaivam. Purushas-chadhidaivatam. Adhiyajna aham eva atra. Adhiyajno ahameva atra dehe deha bhritam vara. I, O Arjuna, I am Adhiyajna. I am the Lord of all yajna, of all sacrifices, and I reside in all embodied beings. I am the in this thing in the Vaishnava language, Yemperuman is referred to as Ranganatha or Ramanuja. Yemperuman is Perumal, the Lord. So if you look at the word embody, he is the Emperuman in the body. So he is embodied in the just trying to play a little bit of the word. He is the embody. He is the Emperuman in the body. So that Emperuman in the body is referred to as here Adhiyajnaha. Adhiyajnaha is the Lord of all sacrifices, which means I am, O Arjuna, the Lord of all sacrifices, which means this whole cycle of creation, sustenance, destruction. Sacrifice is this is the whole cycle of creation, sustenance, and destruction. The cycle is sacrifice. Yajna. And sacrifice. See, the problem with the word yajna in English is directly mapped to sacrifice, but yajna is not necessarily sacrifice. It is action. It is movement. Yajna is movement of creation, sustenance, and destruction. So this movement, adhiyajnaha, aham eva atra, I alone am that. Deha deha bhritam vara. I exist in all the bodies in this form. Then he answers the last 7th question. So he has answered all the 6. He's spoken about Adhibhutam, or he's spoken about Brahma. Brahman is Aksharam Brahma, Aksharam Paramam, which is the indestructible supreme is Brahma. Then Adhi Bhutam is the destructible, whatever you see, the manifest world. It's created and it's destroyed. So this manifest world is Adhibhutam. Then Adhidaivam is the governing entity of all of the celestials, the natural forces. The governing entity of all the natural governing forces, that is Adhidaivam. Adhiyajnam is myself. Then which one is missing? Karma. He explained karma as that action, that looks for a fruit, for a result, and it is generated in all living beings. That is karma. Then which there is one more he mentions, right? Which is what? Adhyatmam. This whose Adhyatmam? Adhyatmam is your own self. Okay. So Brahma, Karma, Adhibhutam, Adhyatmam, Adhidaivam. Then the last one, the next one is Adhiyajnam, and that's the 6th one. The 7th one is the question of how do I leave the earthly plane, Antakale. So he has responded to each other. So Adhyatmam, we said, is the individual self, Jivatma, this individual self, this consciousness that I am experiencing as myself is Adhyatmam. Okay. See, these are basically definitions. He's just giving a definition for these terms for one to look at each one and just ponder about, right? Think about that there are these forms that exist. And then he's saying, Antakale cha mam eva smaran muktva kalevaram. The one who thinks about me alone and drops his body. Yaf prayati sa madbhavam. He becomes like me. Yati nasti atra samshayah. So there is no doubt of this, which means he attains to me, one who thinks about me at the time of death. Okay, so this is where he closes off saying that this is how. So the question he asked is Prayana Kale. What is the question he asked? Prayana Kale cha katham gneyosi niyatatmabhi. How do we think of you, or how do we um, um, bring your thought into the forefront at the time of death? So then Krishna says, Antakale cha mameva, the one who thinks of me alone at the time of death and drops the body, Yav prayati sa madbhavam. He attains to this God-like nature, means madbhavam means a nature similar to mine, which means he attains to me. He attains to me. Now, these five the 5 verses are interesting, because the first few verses are just more on definition in terms of what the term means, right? Because Krishna is telling what these terms mean, and if I'm making a reference of these terms, this is what it means. Okay, so it is about me, Jivatma, it is about Paramatma, it is about the collective Ishvara that is governing everything. Then there is the collective consciousness of all living beings, and there is action involved, and there is yajna, which means the principle of creation, sustenance, and destruction. All of this is what we experience as life. When you go through all these 6 points that he makes, is our experience of life. Right? Our experience of life is kind of considered, is kind of encompassed in these 6 pointers that is mentioned. The 7th one, he's starting to respond. So Shiva, yes, you're right, he has not responded in this particular verse how to do this, but he starts to respond this, and we get to the 6th one, you will see he's starting to give a little more detail in terms of how you think about him. But just staying on the 5th verse, and see, understand this, Arjuna is, although we relate ourselves to Arjuna, we also need to understand that Arjuna is a much sharper individual. Okay, we have to acknowledge that, right? Because he's probably asking the right questions. Maybe if Krishna were to stand there and give us this discourse, maybe we won't ask these questions. We'll say it's ரொம்ப high level இருக்கு, எனக்கு ஒண்ணுமே புரியலன்னு சொல்லிட்டு, because even to formulate a question we should be able to understand the context, you know. So suddenly if we stand in front of a Nobel laureate botanist, and he's going to say something about some plants and some um, this thing, we wouldn't even know what questions to ask, because you're not introduced to that subject, that level of detail, right? But here he's asking reasonably relevant questions. And remember, he's also standing in the battlefield, and these are like burning questions for him, because he got to go fight a war. Yudhyasva Bharata, Yudhyasva Bharata, he is constantly saying. Krishna, at the end of everything, he's saying, go fight. You have to fight. Right? Okay, you're asking me the next question, but at the end, he's again in 3-4 verses, he's going to say, fight with this thought, thinking about me, go fight. He will say that. Thinking about me, go fight. So it's that kind of a context. And also, Arjuna is somebody who's done a lot of tapas. Right? He's done tapas. I think which is why Arjuna is also called out as a unique character in the whole Mahabharata story, right? Because he stands out as um, um,
He gets the Pashupatastra from Shiva himself.
gets Pashupatastra. He does a lot of tapas. I mean, that is just
Yeah.
one thing, right? He does tapasya for a long time. Even as a young boy, he does tapasya. He learns how to fight at night. He, a lot of things he learns on his own and does a lot of sadhana. Now, so this is the kind of person we are talking about who has done a lot of processes within him, and he's also able to capture some of these nuances and understand some of these nuances. So when Bhagavan is saying that antakale mameva, how does he go? Antakale cha mameva smaran muktva kalevaram. The one who leaves the body, smaran muktva, smaran muktva means continuing to think about me, having liberated from the body. So it's a present continuous. So he continues to think about me and then drops the body. Such a person reaches me, right? And then few verses he will go to say that you have to now with this continue to think about me and fight. So we have to look at both of these together. How he says having continuing to think about me, the one who dies reaches me. How do you think about Bhagavan at the time of death? If that's the question, then how do you think about anything at any point in time? How do you consciously think about anything at any point in time? It is by our own volition. It is by our own volition or will that we think about something at any given point in time. At the time of death, how do we think about, if Krishna says, think about me, or think about your Ishta, or think about Paramatma or Brahman at the time of death? How do you do that? You do willfully. You have to do it willfully. That's the only way, right? Any thought that you have to generate saying, this is the thing I'm going to think. If I think of a rose, it is my will that is generating the thought of a rose, and the rose is now filled in my head. My head now, within me, the rose, the petals, the color, maybe the fragrance, maybe the stem, the thorn, everything. Now my consciousness is like rose. My consciousness is rose. When you think about Bhagavan, Kshiro Dhanva Pradeshe Shuchimani Valasat Saikater Moktikanam, when you think about him in the milky ocean, lying down on the serpent, Shantakaram Bhujagashayana Padmanabham Suresham Vishwadharam Gaganasadrisham Meghavarnam Shubhangam Lakshmikantam Kamalaнаyanam Yogibhir Dhyanagamyam Vande Vishnum Bhava Bhayaharam Sarvalokaikanaatham. Dhyana Shloka. So when you think about him like this, on the milky ocean, lying down, resting in his yoga nidra on the serpent bed, and he's got beautiful lotus eyes, Lakshmi sitting beside him, all of that, when you're thinking that is what now completely fills your consciousness. How does this happen? Willfully. You have thought about it. Now the point is, now when I said this, you think about this, right? Now how do you willfully think about this? How does the thought of this particular visual appearance come to your mind without somebody telling? Which is why you notice guided meditations are far more effective. Guided meditations are far more effective than you just meditating yourself. Why? Because somebody guides you into the meditation. Somebody takes your mind and you follow that, you listen to that, and you follow the visualization and you go into a certain state of meditation. Now, this happens because you're now following some sounds or words and you're going along with that. Now, how do you do it within yourself? Who's to come and tell me every moment that, okay, think about Bhagavan? There's nobody to come and tell me. So, at the time of death, willfully, if I have to think about God, how do I ensure I think about God? How do I know for sure I will think about God? Because in this body right now, I can have only death only once, right? How many times can I die and be reborn in the same form? Death is once in this form. So you don't have oh sorry, திருப்பி ஒரு trial கொடுங்க அப்படின்னு. we don't get that, right?
That is said, easily said than done தான் இதெல்லாம்.
Correct.
வந்து அதான் லாஸ்ட் மினிட்ல வந்து either if you are ill, your mind will be focused only on the pain and the body. Unless if you are not with that, at least நீங்க ஒரு கதை சொன்ன மாதிரி எங்கடா அந்த நாலாவது பையன் எங்கடா கடையில யாருமே இல்லையா அப்படின்னு அந்த 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 அட்டாச்மெண்ட்
ஆமா,
சும்மா அட்டாச்மெண்ட் அதுதான் ஃபர்ஸ்ட் வந்து ஐ திங்க் the only attachment you should have is பகவான் அவ்வளவுதான்.
absolutely. Now very interesting point. What comes to fore when your body is failing, when your mind is failing? Remember, when you're about to die, we are not talking about accidents, and we are not talking about these sudden deaths. We're talking about a death that is happening in a gradual. The body is slowly failing, the mind is failing, and this happens when the body starts failing and the mind starts failing, and you are not able to hold on. The thing that dominates your consciousness is what will come up. What dominates your consciousness is what will come up automatically. If you're so much in love with your wife and kids and all that, and you think about them, care about them, next session we will talk about Jada Bharata. We have spoken about the story, Jada Bharata story, but it's always beautiful to keep reminding ourselves that story. When you're so much thinking about that in your consciousness, and you say that, okay, I as a mother, I think about my children, I think about my husband, I think about my family, this is what I keep thinking about. And if death has to come, when some of these volition, this will starts depleting, this is what will come on the top. Our ability to now subdue that and then bring Bhagavan may not be possible, because our ability to do that is also slowly deteriorating. Our ability, the will, is also deteriorating as life is leaving. If somebody thinks that, I have not had coffee for 5 days, I've been denied coffee, you uruva coffee, and then suddenly something happens, and then he's slowly, the mind is falling, the body is falling, coffee, and yoshchindirunda. That is what will remain dominant. How do you make Bhagavan or Perumal or your Ishta or Brahman as the dominant thought? Is possible only when you are able, conscious, awake, and alive. That is the only time. At the time of death, okay, na appo yosikrene appadina, it will not work. Let me think at that time, it will not work. There is an Alvar who's said this. அப்போதிக்கே இப்போதே சொல்லி வைத்தேன் நாராயணா உன் நாமம். Which means I don't know if I'll be able to chant your name, O Narayana, at that time, at the time of death. But you please consider now what I'm chanting or what I'm thinking about you as memories or thoughts or chants in your name for that time. You use it for that time. This is what it means. It means that I have to constantly do this now, so that at the time of death, this becomes my prominent thought. This becomes the dominant thought. Otherwise, it will not come. It will not come. It is very difficult. You cannot, even now when you're willful, you're conscious, you're available, you're alive, you know what you want to do. We are not able to sit for 20 minutes and do dhyana on Bhagavan. Correct? Even now, when we have all the faculties working and everything in good shape and form, and our energies are up, we are not able to sit 20 minutes and do dhyana on Bhagavan. What about when things are depleting, things are going away? Fear will come up. Ayyo, I'm losing my body, my mind, my consciousness, my identity. Things are dropping off. Fear will start setting in. When these things come in, how will this be the dominant thought? Unless we train ourselves during this whole process. So if we think like again, I'd like to mention what my guru always said: keep boring. It may be boring, but keep boring, which means keep drilling. Bore has two meanings, right? One is I'm fed up, it's boring, I'm not interested. But the other bore is to drill. So even if it is boring, keep boring, because that's the only way, till such point that this starts becoming tasty, this starts becoming nectarine, this starts becoming joyful. Just sitting and thinking, a lot of times just to sit and not think about anything is very difficult. It's not very easy. But just to sit, let me think about Bhagavan, let me think about some stories from Bhagavatam, let me think about Shiva, let me think about stories from Shiva Purana, Devi Bhagavatam. Let me just think. For the problem is, when I think about that, the moment the mind comes and says, okay, now you will think about this for 5 minutes, what do you get out of it? The mind will start evaluating. That is where you have to shut the mind and say, shut up. I'm just thinking because I'm practicing the ability to think about it. I am strengthening my ability to willfully think about it whenever I want to. This is what we are generating. This is what we have to generate. So exactly the same question. Okay, very nice. I think we happen to respond to Gayatri's question even before she asks it.
அந்த காலத்துல நான் சொல்லுவேன், அந்த காலத்துல பசங்களுக்கெல்லாம் கூட பேர் வந்து கோபாலா, கிருஷ்ணா, நாராயணா அப்படிதான் பேர் வைப்பா. ஏன்னா அட்லீஸ்ட் அவளோட கூப்பிடுற சாக்கிலையாவது நம்ம அந்த பேரை ஞாபகம் இருந்துட்டே இருக்கோம்.
Exactly. Exactly. So that way, so these
Good way.
verses are important to constantly, even like Mama is saying, even if you're திட்டின்றிருந்தா கூட நாராயணான்னு திட்டுறோம். டேய் நாராயணா இங்க வந்து தொலைடா அப்படின்னு சொல்லி. But at least you're chanting Narayana's name. But the important thing is that
I met one autocaran who actually is practicing this. It was very interesting. This guy went into a depression, and the Parthasarathi Kovil Bhattargalna, they called him and they said, in life la enmalam varum challenges na, but you have to nimay vande nee ayyon sollapradhu, whenever you feel low or and this guy over a 20-minute ride la he was saying Narayana for about 100 times sollirpar. He's like, ஐயோ காதல் என் பேரை சொல்ல வேண்டாம், யூ ஜஸ்ட் கால் மீ நாராயணா, எல்லாத்துக்குமே நாராயணா நாராயணா நாராயணா. Literally he's put it in practice.
Very nice.
Very nice to see.
Very nice. People when we meet each other, they'll say Narayana, say bye bye, they'll say Narayana. They'll say, oh Narayana, why don't you have this to eat? I think, yeah, that's beautiful. I've seen people do that. That's very beautiful.
My sisters shared a short term master ஒரு வயசானவர் வந்து அவர் வந்து வாயில ராம் தான், ராம் ராம் ராம். மாஸ்டர் நாளைக்கு கிளாஸ் உண்டா மாஸ்டர்? ராமராம் ராமராம்.
Yes is also Ram Ram, no is also Ram Ram.
எல்லாமே ராமராம் தான்.
Very beautiful. In fact, Pramod, those who know Pramod, Shiv Kumari came for a yatra. His party, the father's mother, she would chant Akhilandeshwari. The only word, she was completely bedridden for 1 year, and the only word that will come out from her mouth is Akhilandeshwari. Akhilandeshwari, 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 Akhilandeshwari. This is the only word that will come out from her mouth. So, Akhilandeshwari, Akhilandeshwari. If you want something, you say Akhilandeshwari. Don't want something, you say Akhilandeshwari. So, but the important thing is where our consciousness moves when we say that word. That is also important, right? Of course, making it a habit to say is one thing. Also, we need to recognize with that process, I'm also now becoming conscious.
ஒரே ஒரு சின்ன விஷயம். அவ தாத்தா வந்து நாராயணா நாராயணன்னு சொல்லிட்டே 4 வருஷம் கிடந்தாராம் படுக்கையில. என்ன எனக்கு ஒரே ஆச்சரியம் அவகிட்டனா, when they went into coma or something, when they lost their consciousness, அந்த சமயத்துல இந்த வேர்டு தான் அவளுக்கு ஞாபகம் இருந்திருக்கு. That is why they were repeating this particular அம்மா அம்மா தாயே அகிலாண்டேஸ்வரி, அம்மா அம்மா அகிலாண்டேஸ்வரி, அகிலாண்டேஸ்வரி, அம்மா அம்மா அப்படியே சொல்லிட்டு இருப்பா. சோ அந்த பர்டிகுலர் வேர்டை சொல்லும் போது எவ்ரிதிங் ஸ்டாப்டு. சோ அந்த வேர்டு ஒன்லி மைண்ட்ல இருக்கு. தாத்தா வந்து நாராயணா நாராயணான்னு சொல்லிட்டே போனாராம், இவ அகிலாண்டேஸ்வரி சொல்லிட்டு.
Very nice. So this happens, so beautiful. This happens to become your dominant thought if you willfully make it your dominant thought. When we willfully, with our conscious awareness, we make it this a dominant thought during our wakefulness, then when our memory is losing, our mind is becoming dull, slow, body is depleting, this will automatically become the dominant thought, right? So that is what Krishna is saying in these few verses. He continues with this. We'll see it the next week. Yeah, lovely. Om कायेन वाचा मनसेन्द्रियैर्वा बुद्ध्यात्मना वा प्रकृते स्वभावात् करोमि यत् सकलं परस्मै नारायणायेति समर्पयामि, सदाशिवायेति समर्पयामि, जगदम्बिकायै इति समर्पयामि, सद्गुरुनाथायेति समर्पयामि. हरि ओं तत्सद्गुरुभ्यो नमः. देवा. हरि ओम.